Greetings all. Thanks for joining us. We are going to be giving everyone maybe 2 or 3 minutes to trickle in, since this is right after the lunch hour for a lot of folks. But we appreciate you coming here, and Mike's going to kick us off just as soon as we let folks have a chance to join.
Come on. Oh.
Okay, Mike, we can go ahead and get started. Let me bring up the presentation, and I'll go ahead and click through it as you like. Let me bring that up and share. All right, can you guys see that?
I can.
Okay, good. So it's 3 past, and Mike, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah. Okay. Great. So thank you everybody for joining us on a Friday afternoon. Everybody's looking forward to the weekend, and so we don't want to stand in between you and that, but we do have some exciting stuff that we want to talk to you about today. So just some brief introductions in case we haven't spoken in the past. My name is Mike Caruso. I'm with the Tech Center. My role is as the product manager / owner for CCC MyPath. Jane, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jane Linder, and I am the Project SuperGlue Product Owner / manager. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, great. So we're going to be talking to you guys a little bit today. This is kind of almost want to treat it like a 2-part sort of web meeting series. But essentially, we're moving toward the pilot phase for some work on a project called Master Data Management. This impacts some of the technology that underlies MyPath and a lot of the other Tech Center products. And so that's why a lot of you guys have been asked to join, because this will be important for you guys in the future. But rather than focusing on specifically what is changing about MyPath in the near future via these MDM changes, we wanted to kind of take a minute to introduce to all of you guys what master data management actually is, to provide some additional context for these future changes and the pilot we'll be going through. So we have an agenda for you today. You'll see hopefully that it's really focused around an explainer around what MDM is, what it means to you, how it impacts MyPath, and Jane's going to be taking us through some great information about like what MDM is and how it works, and the technologies that make it up, and a lot of the great work that your team is going through right now. So Jane, I think you have the first couple if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Sure. So what the heck is MDM? I know we've had a lot of questions about this, and we've been, as we've been approaching this pilot phase, we've been talking about this a lot in sessions at CCC and Scenic, and really trying to explain to people what it is. I know for myself, when I joined the Tech Center a couple years ago and started meeting with this team, it took me a while to figure out exactly what's going on with this. What are we really trying to provide? And it's a very important aspect of an integrations infrastructure. And I've really appreciated the ability to learn a lot about it, because I think it's going to solve a lot of the problems we face in integrations, both system-wide and then within our various colleges. So as I said, there's really a problem with integration, and the problems are many. And I know that a lot of those of you who are at your institutions, your colleges, you realize this more acutely than even I do. Before coming to the Technology Center, I was with K-12 working on integrations for 6 years with 5,000 districts. And there's just so many problems in terms of trying to move data where it can do the most good, where we can actually get actionable, data that actually can help us point to actionable results in intervening with our students and guiding our students, and even in improving our own internal processes. And so we have a lot of really good data. It's just, how do we get this to the places it needs to go? How do we set up rules to react to it? These are all of the problems that we're facing in our system. So MDM is really built to help solve the integration problem, to help give control on what data comes in and out of your institutions and flows across the system, to make sure that there's security so that we can lock down personally sensitive information and manage, really minutely manage the data access. None of us wants to see our college or our system or district on the front page with a data leak. And so master data management really tries to help ensure that things are secure and only getting where they're needed to be. It also helps to keep systems in sync. With master data management, there's going to be the ability to subscribe to change notifications so that you don't have to wait for a nightly update. You can get things in real time, and again, just what you need. And then there's transparency. There's a lot of, we have a lot of monitoring and logging capabilities through the Unite system. And we're going to be building this out with feedback from pilot colleges, because we want to make sure that there is, absolute transparency in where does this data go, who's requesting my data, what systems do I really want to get what data, and how can I see that that's happening. So MDM is part of what we call our SuperGlue infrastructure, integrations infrastructure. And most colleges are very familiar with one piece of that, and that's the college adapter, which is the on-premise, I guess you'd say, sort of data router that takes the data from system-wide initiatives like our multiple measures initiative, which used to be CCC Assess, and it used to facilitate course exchange. And it's the delivery of the data to the last mile, basically taking these system-wide, system-wide products and then making sure that the data gets where it needs to go into the ERP system. So that's the one piece of Project Glue that a lot of colleges see, but it's much larger. As you can see, the main part of what SuperGlue is in the cloud, and it's system-wide, and master data management is actually part of that. So it's an infrastructure that is providing master data management, is providing data synchronization. We have an API gateway. And so what we're trying to do is build out this infrastructure so that all of these initiatives that the Chancellor's Office is asking us to support can go one place to route the data, to track the data, to get data change notifications and pull the data from the source systems. It's all connected. And so instead of having all of these pointers going all over, from system to system, there's just one place that it can route through in order to get whatever data needs to happen to facilitate the actions at your systems. So we'll be diving into that a little bit more, but that's just the general overview. So what is MDM and how does it fit into this infrastructure that we're building out? Okay, Mike, I think you're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in MyPath and why MDM is important.
Yep, exactly. So I guess to try to drill this down, let's talk a little bit about why why this matters to you and functionally, like what we're trying to do, especially vis-a-vis the MyPath product. We have a need, obviously, to deal with data management across a whole host of projects and products that touch your colleges. Let's talk specifically just about MyPath. Essentially, we know that there is data in a lot of different systems, all of which can contribute, especially to MyPath's capabilities as an onboarding platform. We know that we have data that needs to come to you to the download client from CCC Apply, and that all that data also is what makes up the actual onboarding pathway that we build for your student. So, for example, we know that if the student is a veteran, or if we learn in the application that the student needs access to childcare services, or if they need access to information about financial aid, all those are things that we learn in CCC Apply, but then which need to make their way into MyPath so that we can provide the correct onboarding steps per the Guided Pathways mandate. We also know that there is a desire for that onboarding process to contain steps that can be informed by systems outside of CCC Apply. So students taking action in a career exploration product like Career Coach. Students taking action in systems that you have locally there on campus like Comevo or orientation products that you guys have. We want us to be able to stream these pieces of data into MyPath and also to your local systems so that we can actually sort of create a unified system whereby we don't have a bunch of completely siloed products that stand alone, that don't interact with one another, and which require effort on the college's end to kind of manually maintain all of these different sort of systems of record so that you can create an experience for the students that makes sense. The idea is that we want to kind of unify as much of that as possible through this work.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a bit about the student profile data, right?
Yeah, exactly. So as everybody knows, we have a system that sits underneath MyPath that drives all of our ability to create a dynamic onboarding platform. And it's driven by what's called the MyPath student profile. That's where we collect all the information currently just from CCC Apply to drive that onboarding experience that we talked about earlier. So, the student's application data, some of it is copied into the student profile. And that is what our rules engine references, so that when you create rules that say things like if veteran, create an onboarding step for veteran services, if English is a second language, have this be the second step that they go through. These are all essentially controlled by a set of infrastructure that the MyPath team has developed in a one-off way with the CCC Apply team. The idea here is that all of that infrastructure, in an effort to move into this MDM world, is going to be replaced with MDM infrastructure. The really good news about that is that we are doing or making this shift in such a way that you should not notice any changes whatsoever. They will be completely invisible to your students, and they will be completely invisible to you as administrators once we go live with this functionality. So there will be no change at all, including when we roll this stuff out into production. But what we're going to ask for, in an effort to make sure that that we're all comfortable with this change, is some help validating this work to make sure that what we're saying is true, that there is no shift, no change, no discernible difference that you can tell in terms of the functionality of MyPath once we move our infrastructure over. Awesome. And so now we have a great explainer that Jane's going to give us on exactly what MDM is and how it functions. And I think that she's got some great info for you guys.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, we're kind of distilling down a longer presentation for you guys. So we didn't want to overwhelm with too much detail. So what we're going to do is give you, you know, the next 5-10 minutes to kind of go in an overview on MDM in general. And then we will have time at the end for questions. And we have additional, you know, documentation and all kinds of information that we can pass on to you as well. All right, so just again, this picture again to show you the components of MDM. Now, master data management is driven by largely by a UI and a web-based application that's developed by Unite. This is a company that is in partnership with us currently. The last 2 years, they've worked with the Technology Center to develop this MDM product. And the partnership is such that the California Community College system, all of the colleges and you know, the institutions, including the Chancellor's Office within the California Community Colleges, has licensed to the Unite MDM product in perpetuity. So that's what the partnership is. And so MDM is something that is provided for free to the colleges. With this initial release, as Mike was saying, it's a very small background process. It's really just an infrastructure. We've used the Unite UI ourselves to create the data domains and the MDM zones that we use for this background process, but there's really not going to be a UI for you guys to use in this release. However, Mark Fitzpatrick, who's the CEO of Unite, is going to demo that UI and show you what we created using MDM in order to make the process that we're going to ask you to pilot test, make that happen. So Mark, I just want to make sure you know that after this section here, I'll probably want to turn it over to you for that, so you can show that.
Okay. Yep. Ready to go.
Right. So once again, we have the UI where we create the data domains and the zones, which really are the pieces within MDM that say, this is the data, and this is the data model for the data. These are the snippets of the fields, and it's the model that guides the interoperability to make sure that that data is easily transformed to the format that the systems that are needing that data can get it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how we're building out our data models and what we're using as guidance for that. But also in the Unite application, you're able to formulate data management rules. So that's where you would actually decide what data goes to which systems that you're connected with. And then that's where you set up your notifications and your data access rules. The MDM connector is what actually ends up working with our SuperGlue infrastructure, the API gateway, to make sure that we know where all of these systems that you see in sort of purple outside the big yellow SuperGlue circle, all of these systems that we're connecting with, how it flows into the API gateway, and then MDM works to make sure that data is getting synced across everything. It's making sure that it's tracking what's going on. So as I said, the connector, it receives those change notifications and routes them to whatever systems have subscribed to those changes. That's part of MDM and how you set things up, what systems you're going to subscribe to for which changes. There's the data management and governance. What we said, it'll enforce data access policies that are determined by your college. Some of the again, original rollouts of MDM are going to include whatever data access has been mandated by the integration. And so, for example, in this student profile service, we made sure that all of that data is flowing between systems. We didn't really need to worry about the governance because it's really from a Technology Center product to another Technology Center product. But the governance rules are going to come in when we start rolling this out at your colleges, and you are going to decide what data comes and goes through MDM. And some of that data is going to be mandated, obviously, by the Chancellor's Office because they're going to want to report on it. So there will most likely be a lot of governance talk about what are the things that are required that you send to places like the Chancellor's Office, and then what are the things that can be what are the governance rules that you adopt for your own college. And again, this actually makes sure that there's really explicit protection of a lot of sensitive data. Okay, zones are the areas. Basically, it defines the permissions and scopes for a specific college or a district. So you would have a college zone or a district zone. And these zones are hierarchical. And when Mark shows you the Unite UI, you'll see how we have a chancellor's office zone that's kind of set up as our parent zone. And then we have tech center zones under that. Domains are the data models. And right now what we have is this, we have student domains. And again, when developing these domains, we're really trying to make sure that the data is broken down in a way that doesn't make it too monolithic, and it makes it easy for you to set things up so that you just get the data that you need. Okay, MDM is what we call federated data management. In other words, we are not, and it's kind of important to talk about what it's not as well as what it is. We are really, the MDM system is not a central data store. All right, we are not a central data store. It gets very tricky, as I'm sure a lot of you know, when you try to make everything centralized, because then you hit all kinds of problems with performance and lag time and things like that. The way MDM is made, it really, again, gives the flexibility to the institutions to decide what are their systems of record, where do they want to store their data. There's no requirement to actually throw everything into a central pot. What MDM does is it says, you tell us what your source of record is, your source of truth, and that's what we track. So that when changes happen there, we know to publish them to the places that subscribe to those changes. So it's federated, it keeps track of where the sources of data are. It is not in itself this big central data store. And that means that, again, it gives the flexibility for the colleges to continue. They own their data and they decide where it's going to go. So for a federated system, the source system could be the college, it could be a tech center system, it could be a chancellor's office system, but it's really, it doesn't really matter. It could be any of those systems. In a centralized world, of course, there's just a single system, and we really did not want to get caught up in that. So what's exactly happening here with this student profile service? This kind of breaks it down step by step. And I'm not going to get too much into it because I think time-wise we need to probably move on to our demo here soon. But it shows you how we're taking the applied data, if you look all the way to the left, and it'll walk you through exactly what's going on. And like I said, you'll have this presentation, but this graphic is also in our pilot test guide, so you can really break it down and take a look at it there. But again, without MDM, each system here would have an isolated channel of communication. They'd have to be pointing all over. But with master data management supporting it, there's just a central data pointer where all of the systems can go to. Okay, before I get into the power of system-wide data models, Mark, I was going to have you show the MDM UI and what we've set up for the pilot. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and let David, can Mark share? Does he have the right to do that?
Yep, I made him co-host, so he should be able to.
Okay, good. So I'm going to mute myself and stop sharing. And Mark, you can take it away.
All right. Do you see the Unite UI?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so the Unite UI is going to integrate in with whatever. Well, hello, everybody. And
yeah, introduce yourself. Oh, and zoom that screen. It's tiny.
Oh, zoom this screen. I don't. I wish I would have known that. Let's see. How about if I give me a minute here. Let's see what this does. I'm on a high definition display, so perhaps if I change.
Yeah, while you're working on that, I'll just take a second to speak to something that I meant to cover earlier, which is that in terms of some of the more concrete ways that this might affect.
Now I've just destroyed my audio by doing that. Give me 1 second here.
Okay, we can still hear you though. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of some of the more concrete ways this is going to affect some of the colleges. In terms of short term, replacing MyPath's infrastructure obviously isn't going to impact any of the way that Apply or MyPath work at the college. But what it does is sets us up in the future to be able to much more easily work with this data in terms of supplementing our own products. So gaining access for MyPath to additional data sources like career exploration, like orientation platforms, like Canvas, like all those kinds of things. eTranscript is another great example. So that we can integrate those into MyPath's capabilities to build an onboarding experience for your students. Similarly, via both MDM and what SuperGlue does, we want to be able to work with those same data streams and be able to transmit them to the college, in a much more integrated, seamless fashion than what something like, for example, the download client provides. So you can imagine a world in the not distant future at all where the download client is an option for a college to be able to retrieve apply data, but also we can use SuperGlue via MDM to transmit that data directly to your college so that there is no lag time associated with the download client anymore. We're just going to be able to send apply data directly to the college.
Yes, that's actually coming in the Glue Release 2.5, which is going into general availability September 28th. So
yes,
the
exactly.
standard, yeah. So actually, if Glue is already doing that in terms of delivering that data directly down, and that is really good because it gives you a chance to get that data into your recruitment systems right away. And one of the things that's going on involving SuperGlue, which involves MDM, is one of the next big releases we're hoping with CCC Apply is going to involve breaking CCC Apply up into smaller data chunks so that you can start flowing that data down, when the student clicks next to do another form. If they've chosen a school and they've given basic contact information, that can come down right away rather than waiting for them to fill out the entire application before you get data. So that's something we're actively looking at running through, again, MDM, because then MDM can track any changes and give you the most updated data until the student finalizes that application. So it's going to be really, really important in a lot of what we're trying to do to make things like CCC Apply better and more responsive for what the colleges need.
Exactly, and just to cap that off, it doesn't end with CCC Apply either, right? We know there's a lot of other data that we can help access and manage for you that you're going to want to stream to yourselves locally as well. I mean, things like career coach data, what your students are doing in Career Coach, syncing MyPath orientation status with whatever your local orientation systems and SIS flags are, the possibilities really are endless. They're only limited by the sources of data that we can gain access to. So it's a pretty exciting roadmap we have for this in the future.
Yep, one of my real important things that I'm heading for, that I know that a lot of the colleges have talked to me about and what they want to get out of both SuperGlue and MDM is, get to a point where MIS reporting is happening, through MDM, so that really there's not a submission. It just, data updates as data changes, so the chancellor's office has that information without having to, put everyone through the hoops, every time when they want to submit. All right, great. So Mark, why don't you go ahead and get started?
All right, you see this look okay?
Yeah,
that's perfect. Thanks.
Okay. So Jane talked about zones, and I'll just talk about that briefly. This is running in the QA environment inside the tech center. And in this deployment, there's just a few zones here. And we've logged in under the tech center. But if we look at zones, we can see that there's this hierarchical view of zones. And you can see the chancellor's office and then the tech center and another tech center zone being subordinate to it. And it's sort of really important to note here, just under governance and some of the things Jane was talking about, was that
audio is kind of getting a little robotic-like.
Oh, of course. All right. Well.
Okay, I can hear you fine now.
Okay. So when it's important to note that when a zone's created, there's a data governance steward assigned to a zone. And, that would be someone at a college that's designated as such, or a district. And at that point, they have total control of the data that's associated with the zone. And I'm going to just sort of race around here quickly. And we can see that, say, in this zone, there's a few adapters, or what Jane was calling connectors. And these are the entities that are touching the systems where the data lives. And the data governance steward for the zone has control over those. And I just wanted to touch on that real quickly. When we can, again, there's a lot to talk about there, limited amount of time. Jane also was talking about domains and data domains, and we can see here that a data governance person has gone and created some data domains, and this is basically the data model. And you know, this process is about studying the data as it lives on the systems and trying to come up with a uniform data model that'll work between all the systems so data can be exchanged between the systems. And so the adapters would conform to that. So once adapters are in place and domains are defined, then Jane was talking about governance and ACLs and things like that. The appropriate person can come into the dashboard and basically set up what I like to call sort of like firewall rules around the data. It's what college does the data want to allow in and what data does it want to allow out. And so we've talked about zones. So if we wanted to say build an outbound ACL or an outbound governance, we don't want to share something, we could specify what zone we don't want to share it with, or all zones. We can specify what domains. We can say from what adapter or connector that's part of our zone do we want to block data. And then we can say what sort of operations do we want to block. So Jane, let me know, and I could touch on some other things here. You know, we can register for data notifications.
No, I think right now that's good. I wanted to kind of give you guys a look at the UI and what we've set up for this, mainly just to give you sort of heads up on this is the sort of thing that we're going to be rolling out at the colleges, and you'll be able to use this. The first few releases are going to be probably more like this one, where we're going to be using this in the background, or we're going to be using it for mandated initiatives. So there's really no sense, there's not really a data governance. It's really a situation where the chancellor's office or the functions within the systems themselves dictate what data is required. But once we actually start getting things like apply and some of this other stuff, so that in train, once we get those systems all set up, the next thing is rolling this out to you so that you can use this for your own purposes as well. So part of our ask of you guys, of the MyPath schools here, since you guys are the first ones to get a look at this, is going to be not only can you help us test just this very short pilot, but how many of you would be interested in the long term getting some training on this UI, playing around with it, giving us your feedback on what needs to happen in terms of making this as useful as possible for your institution. So just something for you guys to think about. But in this pilot, you are not going to be interacting with this UI. It was just what we use to set up all the background processes for what you're going to see. So thank you, Mark. That's great.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and seize control again and share my screen. All right, so as Mark was showing, we have already started on the idea of system-wide data models with this project and some others that are coming up, where we have really looked at how do we create some system-wide data models that are going to accommodate all of the various vendors, all of the various systems we're interacting with. You know, for example, everybody wants student data. So how do we model that data in a way that's going to make it able to be efficiently exchanged across the system? So again, this is all about student success. We want to make sure this data gets where it needs to go to make sure that students can actually have feedback on, where they're at with maybe their application process, maybe their financial aid process, their guided pathway in terms of how they're doing for their classes, getting updates from their learning management system on what's going on day to day in class. All of these things are things that if we can get this data shared across the system, becomes a lot more powerful and more possible in supporting the students. Also, it helps to really make sure that faculty and staff can be empowered by this data and help guide students. And there was an Amazon reInvent last year in November, and there was a school in Indiana, Ivy Tech, that talked about how they pulled all of their historical data they had from their learning management system and found out that one of the biggest indicators of student success was just how often students are logging in to their learning management system. So nothing really personal, nothing that would, be invading the student's privacy, just, how often are they logging in? And so they found that the students who weren't logging into their LMS system within the first week of school had a huge rate of failure. And so they started to intervene and ask students, hey, we've noticed that, you haven't logged into your learning management system. Can we help you with logins? What's blocking you? And just that phone call to the kids and helping them negotiate, some of them, how to get on, how to log in, where they can get Wi-Fi access for those who had challenges in having home Wi-Fi, really helped to increase their student success in a big way. So this is the sort of thing that data can do when you're able to actually analyze it and get it where it needs to be. Okay, so the MDM data models we're working on, we're not just developing our own methodology for this, we're really looking at international and national standards, things like PESC, things like IMS Global. What are some of the people in the educational technology realm, what are they proposing for things like student roster data, student contact data, and some of the formats and the models for that. So we're trying to use best practices. And we're looking at also the SIS ERP data sets and state reporting data sets, and we're using those as baseline. We're actually working right now with a consortium of ed planning vendors to come up with a common student ed plan data model. So that's something that we're trying to do to make sure that, again, all of these vendors being on board means that those ed plans can go into a central repository and be shared. And that way, again, there's a way where we could have a system-wide deployment of that we can use for monitoring, that we can share across colleges if a student is taking classes at more than one institution. Okay, and this is just a summary on we're really trying to make sure that data management isn't a burden. And again, wanted to point out that in this rollout, as well as other rollouts, there's really not going to be a whole lot of data management tasks for you. It's built into the system. And so there'll be templates for you guys that are built into the system that'll help with the data management on some of the critical functions we're doing. All right, and as I mentioned, as we go out, a lot of the data management policies and procedures are going to be determined by your college data stewards and your college administration. And then, also, we've been doing a lot of research on data management from some of the analytical firms and getting advice from them. We've also been talking to other states and finding out, what are some of your promising practices, for data management. And we're trying to, as I said, determine templates that we can give you so that you're not starting from scratch. You can just modify. Okay, so we talked a lot about, what our view is of the MDM vision. Let's just kind of round up on what we have today and what's coming down the pipe. So today, as you saw, Mark was demonstrating, we have our baseline MDM product. We can actually create MDM zones. So we're capable, right now we're actually able to create a zone that would be a zone for each college in the system. We have the ability to create, we call them scopes. I should have changed that to ACLs, but we have the ability to create those access control lists. We have the ability to create our data domains. We have this first use case is very small because this is actually a very big product. And so we want to make sure that our first pilot is kind of a small pilot. And then once it's proved out, we make sure it's performant, it's working as it should. Then we have actually the ability to really rapidly ramp up with some of the stuff we're going to do in future. So again, the first use case is this MyPath student profile. The future is we are now, from this point out, every new release of not just SuperGlue, but every release of a system-wide product like Apply, the things that go out into and out of the data warehouse, and things that are coming from multiple measures, our e-transcripts, all of that is now going to be rolled out within that, with MDM as part of our integrations structure. And then, like I said, we're building out our administrative tool set. So this is where why we're kind of coming to you guys now. We want to try to get a good group of colleges who are interested in what we're doing with this to provide feedback on what are the best ways to roll this out at the colleges to make it easier for you guys to use. All right, so that's pretty much just our general talk about MyPath MDM and what we're doing. I'm going to jump a little bit into the details of what we're asking of you guys as pilot testers, should you want to assist us in that. Before I get to that, do we have any questions from anyone? And David, maybe we should open it up at this point. What time is it? 1:40? We can open it up for like 5 minutes of questions and then get specifically into the pilot.
Okay. Let me go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone here. And then if you want to jump in, just go ahead and speak up. Okay.
And do we have any questions in the chat that I haven't seen?
Looks like nothing in the chat now.
Okay.
So the line should be open if you have a question that you'd like to ask.
If not, we will have some time afterwards. Okay, we can just go straight into the MDM pilot and what we're actually asking of you guys, and then we'll have another 10 minutes for questions after that. Okay, David, ready?
Yep, go for it.
Okay. So what are we asking of you? What we would like is we'd like to get at least, we'd like to get 10 colleges who are interested in what we're doing with MDM to be our team of colleges to provide input and feedback on what you're seeing, what you like, what you don't like. We would work with these colleges to kind of train you guys up on the Unite UI so you can play around with it. But for this pilot, this specific pilot, there's a very, very small ask of you guys. And that is really something that's going to add up to maybe 2 hours a week for 2 to 3 weeks, and that's it. So what we're doing is we've developed a list of 7 personas that are based on different backgrounds and different personalities that we have when we're thinking of our students. And we want you to test a new persona every couple days. Like I say, there's just seven personas and 8 steps for this test. And we want you to run through creating a CCC account for these students, then logging into MyPath and clicking on an advisor card, checking your email and validating the data that comes through, and then logging back into CCC account, changing some of those values, submitting a college application, and then logging into MyPath and validating, again, click on the advisor card and validate that the changed data actually changed. So it's actually very straightforward. And, again, if you do a new persona every couple days, that's only maybe 15 or 30 minutes a persona. So it's like 1.5 to 2 hours most every week. And then we would like you to document your results in a testing Google Sheet where you say, your ideas on, did everything happen the way it should have? Did the data come through? The changes come through? How did it lag? Just give us your feedback on that. So that's what we're talking about. 8 steps, 7 personas. There's a pilot test guide we have that takes you through every specific step in the, that we're expecting you to perform with screenshots and information on every step. We also have a pilot testing spreadsheet that gives you all the data that we've done for these personas. So it gives you the data that we give you a lot of suggested data to use for the applications for them, so you don't have to come up with your own ideas. And then you get to document your results. And I say for personal glory and prizes, because I have a handful of Pete's coffee cards and Starbucks cards for people who, join us in this and keep up on their testing. So we will, be asking you guys to let us know if you're interested in this by next Friday, because our target pilot date is actually starting 2 weeks from today on September 21st. That's where our target pilot release date is. And then we're going to kick off the pilot the following week, the week of September 24th. Once we have the names of everyone who are interested in helping us test this out for a couple weeks, we will kick it off on a day that works for everyone. And we'll step through that pilot testing guide and these things I just referred to. Again, it's 2 weeks, approximately 2 hours per week. Prizes awarded to our top testers. And again, please get back to us by next Friday, end of business, and let us know if you're in or out, because then we'll be sending out our invitations to the kickoff. And that is pretty much it. And like I said, I hope you see that there's really a lot of potential for what this can do. And we'd really like your input, not just in this very small test, but on how this gets rolled out and how we, how we develop this going forward. So this is really a chance to get in on the ground floor, see what it's about, and really influence something that's, I think, going to be of a major importance to the system. Oh, any other questions?
Worth noting too, if you do think of anything afterwards, Jane and I can be reached by email anytime.
Yes. And David, you're going to be sending out a recording of this, and please make sure, because I should have put here Mike and my contact, if you could put that in the follow-up email, that would be great.
I will. I'll be sending it out to the mailing list of attendees for this particular webinar, so you should be seeing it in your email inbox.
Okay, so before we sign off, does anybody have any other questions or any other concerns or any things that you want to get clarified? All right, thanks everyone for coming. We appreciate your time. Have a great weekend.